And we're live.
Hello!
Hello!
La, la, la. Happy New Year! Merry New Year!
Merry New Year! Happy New Year. In this country, we say Happy New Year.
Anyway, hi. It is a Tuesday afternoon, Generational Change, January 2nd, 2024. I'm Jen.
I'm Peter. And this is only temporary, but the reason why we're doing this at noon is because we do have a special guest today.
We have a special guest.
We do. Usually when we have a special guest, we like to make accommodations.
Well, we do when it's people that we want to talk to that can't necessarily, especially people that are on a campaign trail.
Yes, that is.
I always have a lot of empathy for candidates on a campaign trail doing interviews. And so pretty much if we're able to be flexible, we try to be flexible.
Yes, we are looking forward to speaking with Harper.
At least if it's a viable candidate that we think is worth getting behind.
Oh, geez, that's so terrible. That's like the only reason to speak to somebody?
No, but that might be a reason we would alter our schedule.
Well, the one thing we've learned.
We've had lots of candidates on that we've thought have no chance and that whatever, but they were totally nice and I'm happy to give people platforms, but I wouldn't necessarily alter my schedule. That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
It's not like a Cornel West situation.
For everybody who is watching on Twitter, please, or X, please come join us on YouTube. Smash that.
Stop being Muska fans, people. Stop.
What's wrong with being a Muska fan?
You know what? It's all gonna just end where it's supposed to end for him.
Russell Daubler from Due Dissonance has insisted that this is going to be doomsday year for Tesla. We'll see if he's right. That's one of his.
I will say this: is Russell is fairly bright.
Yes.
So I will say that, but it's one of those things where you just never know. And it's almost like you never know what kind of trick an oligarch's going to pull out of their sleeve at the last minute.
I just get an update on my phone from the South Florida Sun Sentinel. This is what passes for news these days
Okay, you have to preface that. The Florida Sun Sentinel is a rag. It has never been
owned by a billionaire and caters almost exclusively to the.
It's never really been taken seriously as a news publication.
Definitely not as of late. And so what the headline is will 2024 be the year fake news destroys democracy? Yeah, that's what.
You know what it is? You know what the Sun Sentinel is? It's like the newsletter for Del Boca Vista.
Del Boca Vista.
That is the level of that to me is the level of news of the Sun Sentinel. It's like it would be the newsletter of Del Boca Vista. And actually the audience of the Sun Sentinel all live in places like Del Boca Vista.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Nobody under the age of I don't think anybody under the age of 60, 50, other than my friend Raquel, reads the Sun Sentinel. I honestly don't know anybody.
The one thing that ends up happening with a lot of these legacy media outlets, and this is something that Jen experienced when she ran for Congress in 2020, is on one hand, you have one major publication that decided before the interviewing process even began that they were going to make it known their preference for one of the two candidates, and they laid it on pretty thick. And then the other one, which in my opinion is even worse, is when you interview a candidate under false pretenses.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the first one with the second one, because the first one, I flat out asked their editorial board, the editor, I said, if this is going to be something where I'm just jumping through hoops, I don't want to waste my time. And she said, oh, no. She assured me that this was some legitimate thing. And that was Del Boca Vista.
Yes. And so you have that one aspect of the circumstance that.
And then the guy who lied.
Well, yeah.
And then Alex Dougherty at the Miami Herald.
There's no point in mentioning the person's name.
It's just he's a hack.
The point is that person decided to interview Jen with this idea that it was going to be an actual candidate interview. And then what it ended up becoming was a complete smear job by basically saying this person's a fool for running and has no business doing it.
And interviewing people that have never even met me.
Correct. And so by doing that, what you do is you completely and continue to perpetuate your own demise, because people are never going to trust you. They're not going to respect you, and they're not going to talk to you.
Which is why I think it's okay to name names. I think that when you're putting yourself out there with a byline as a journalist, first of all, you are somewhat a public figure. You're making yourself public. Yeah. And so if you're going to put out garbage, then it's okay for people to tell your name attached with that garbage because you put your name on it. So I don't think there's a problem with that. But yeah, I would never speak to anybody at either of our local newspapers here again. I just wouldn't.
Yeah.
I won't talk to the Sun Sentinel, and I will not talk to the Miami Herald. They have no integrity. And I do realize that there are good journalists and good reporters that do work for those publications. I do know that. In fact, I know some. I get that. But they are run by, and their editorial boards are such that they're garbage. And they don't even, it doesn't even allow the good reporting that they can get at their papers to take front and center. I actually know a really good freelance reporter that does work for the Herald. And you're not seeing enough of that. So they're garbage.
Yeah, it is unfortunate that, we have come to a place where you have somebody like a Trump who is become such a prominent political figure in this country, not because he's some amazing political genius. It just so happens that the system is so perpetually broken at this point that basically everyone's just looking around at what is going to be that person. Yeah, there is somewhat of that issue that you run into, politically speaking, where people get so desperate that they're more or less looking for a savior. And that, of course, is the role that somebody like Trump is more than willing to play, because it's very narcissistic and ego driven. But at the same time, you can't look around in the dawn of 2024 and not recognize that things are significantly worse.
Well, but people love teams, and people have to have villains. And so if you have the bad guy, you have to have a good guy. And this is just this constant mental dichotomy that we're stuck with. And I think it tends to be worse here. It almost seems like, and I think a lot of that is connected to capital. But, humans definitely tend to have this sort of need to have categorize and label and have teams and all this stuff. But I have learned so long ago that you can actually be in a situation where there are no good guys. None. Yeah. There could be 5 parties and they all suck. So it doesn't, having choices is really only good if any of the choices are good.
That again, I think, is where the entire dynamic of politics is going to change. It's going to have to change, because when you look at the dynamic that is evolving right now, which is the 2 current leading candidates in the major parties in our country for president of the United States, it's always, well, no, Biden's terrible. No, Trump is terrible. People are done with this voting of the lesser two evil stuff. Yeah. You have to be inspired. You have to feel that there's a promising future ahead if you actually are voting for somebody in question. And that is something that we don't see so often. But maybe it's going to change.
I don't know. I think the spectrum of people who are willing to say, fuck it, let's just pull the Band-Aid off, it's directly correlated to your discomfort in life. So when people are very comfortable with the way things are, they're scared of anything different. When, let's say, your people are being subjected to a genocide, really doesn't get any worse.
Yeah, and this
it's like you can't tell people that are going through, and it isn't even just that. It's people dire financial situation. You've got the unhoused population is just like all of it. When you are talking at people whose lives are at the absolute worst they can be right now, it doesn't matter to them.
Yeah, shaming and all that stuff.
They have nothing to lose. And unfortunately, there are more and more people in that category.
Than there ever has.
To me, this is whatever that percentage is. What's the percentage of people that can't afford a $400 emergency? Whatever that number is.
It's over half the population.
Okay, whatever that number is, those people, they're already at the bottom of the rung.
Well,
they're already holding on by a thread.
Well,
so the idea that you're saying that, oh, he's scary, yeah.
Well, we do have somebody who may know a thing or two about how to change that dynamic, and he is a multi-talented individual. And what I mean by that is he is an author of the book The Wealth Cure: Putting Money in Its Place. We certainly have a lot of problems with that these days. He's also a noted actor who has been in many noted shows such as CSI New York and the good doctor, and he is a candidate for the United States Senate in the state of Michigan, which I think we, in many ways, we consider sort of bellwether, kind of determines.
It might be important.
I think it's very important.
It might be important. There might be some importance there.
It's really important, totally important, really important. We're going to find out. Hill Harper, welcome to Generational Change.
Hey, it's great to be on, guys. How are you?
Good. It's so nice to meet you. I didn't know that you even had a acting background. Am I like the only person who didn't know this?
I guess not, but that's not what defines one. But
no,
actually,
that's why I didn't even know that. That's interesting.
Well, Jen, I read that you're a lawyer, an activist, and you ran against an establishment candidate. So I feel like we have three things very much in common. Three things.
That's good. Very, very good. So it's so nice to meet you. And actually, the first time that I really heard of you was regarding the Israel lobby. And it's as something that, as people know me, I was raised very, very Zionist. I am now very anti-Zionist. And it is something that we've been covering a lot here, not just recently, but really for more than a year, we've been covering this issue. And so I follow what the Israel lobby does very closely. Like that kind of stuff is on my radar. And so I wanted to ask you how that went down, how they approached you, and what that experience was like dealing with them.
I was driving my car to go to Pontiac, Michigan for an event, and I get a call from someone I actually knew before. And he says, Hill, he cut right to the chase. We got $10 million in soft money. We'll raise $10 million of hard money for you. You got to jump to get out of this U.S. Senate race and primary Rashida Tlaib. I mean, that was basically the conversation. And they were looking to get a twofer, right? They were looking to have me not run against a candidate that they're very much supporting in the U.S. Senate, and they wanted to target the only Palestinian member of the United States Congress at the same time. And so I think that in their mind, that must have been a bargain. I, of course, said no. And it's really not about that one call, Jen. It's about the fact that our system is built that allows calls like that to happen, because you have to ask yourself, well, in the gradation of how many of calls and money, how many of those calls have been made? How many of people who are supposedly representing us, the people, accept those calls and therefore take action? I mean, I think that if you look at other parts of the country, there's probably a pretty clear example of a few that we can say when people made some different decisions that those types of calls were accepted. And so we have to change the system. We have to get money out of politics. If we don't do that, we're going to continue to allow groups like that, whether we're talking about the Israel lobby, whether we're talking about NRA, whether we're talking about big pharma, all of that doesn't matter. The fact is they all have the ability to do what they do, and that influence carries so much weight that we're seeing people not represented. Lobbyists, special interest, corporate interest, that's what's being represented, and certainly not the people.
Yeah, no, it's a huge problem. And you can now add whistleblower in a way to one of your resume items, because the fact that not only that you said no, personally, like if I had done like a modicum of research on you, I'm sure I would have realized, yeah, that's probably not going to work. And it's like, and it's interesting to me though, they have no strategy. They have no strategy. They're so desperate. And it's like, you can tell that they're so desperate. And I just feel like that the facade is falling away. I do. I feel like more and more people are seeing through it, thanks to people like you saying, yeah, this happened. Because you could have just as easily not ever said anything.
Well, to be quite honest, I wasn't planning on saying anything. I called the congresswoman, let her know that the call happened. There were other people, a few other people that had gotten a similar call after I said no, other people. So, we talked about it, and I thought that was that, to be quite honest. And then got a call from an outlet to say that they had heard from someone that this call happened. and they were asking me to confirm, deny, etc. You know, I'm just not in the, you know, it was a private call from somebody, and but as soon as I knew it was going to be in the public discourse, I wasn't going to allow someone to lie and say the call didn't happen, and I wasn't going to allow folks to sort of create their own narrative of what the call was, because it was very clear what it was. So speaking to it very clearly and making sure that, you know, no, in this case, you're not going to get away with it, and I'm not going to be bought. I'm not going to be bullied. I'm not going to be bossed. And that's what's so crazy. And I guess because it works, right? Folks are
Yes.
bought. Folks are bullied. Folks are bossed, and they're scared. And we have to get to a place where we're not running in fear, particularly when we're talking about things from the idea of representing people, empathy, support. And I love what you guys talk about as far as service. I say Senate is service. Like, and I know that the whole thing around generational change is the idea of returning politics to service, which is, I think, fantastic, because if people actually realized how far away we've gotten, particularly in Congress, away from this idea of what it fundamentally should be, and that's a body serving people, then we would have different outcomes, and we certainly would be electing different people to office.
Mr. Harper, I think it's immensely important that you spoke out, because I do think that there is way too much of this shadow business that goes on in politics and no one wants to talk about. Michigan is an immensely important state politically for both major parties. It may actually be the ground zero state for the 2024 presidential election. And so as a result, there's going to be countless amounts of dark money that is not going to be spoken about. But I think it's important that you say what you did say, because it's not just for Rashida, it's for Ilhan Omar, it's for Cori Bush, it's for Summer Lee, it's for even AOC, it's for a lot of these representatives, Jamal Bowman, who are willing to speak out against the Israel lobby. And the second a candidate all of a sudden appears out of nowhere and all of a sudden is flushed with this cash, it needs to be a shot across the bow.
You mean like Chantel Brown?
To the voting demographic, to basically let everybody know that, yeah, this person's on the take. They are not going to represent your interests in any way, shape, or form. And we need to speak truth to power. It's absolutely important. It's not getting into the mud, you know, but it is absolutely essential that people know that the overwhelming majority of our elected representatives, especially at the federal level, are bought and paid for by corporate money. It's that simple.
Absolutely true. But Peter, even more importantly, I think that we have to figure out a way to speak to people's hearts and minds and get them back into the process, because you both know that the largest voting bloc in Michigan and in the country are people who don't vote. Because they feel that there's no return on their investment, because they don't have lobbyists, they don't write checks, and therefore they know they're not being represented. And so the problem is that I believe you get these people back into the process, and we can get them back in if we come with, like you said, first of all, transparency, come with the facts, but also give them something to rally around. We have to say, you hold the power. The people have the power. And I always say the many over the money, right? We're going to get the many over the money. And we have to do that. But more folks across the country have to be talking about this all the time, because it's not just about one candidate here and one candidate there. Because if it's just that binary and just that, the call to action doesn't ring loud enough to bring people out. And that's what a movement has to happen, or else the money will win. And unless we're able to create a real movement, it's going to be very difficult. And so that's why coming on this show with you is important. Having these types of conversations is important, because I know you all share that. And so this has to become a movement, or we will lose.
Wait, I just want to ask, so given that, and I think that, and this is one of the reasons why I would have such trepidation about ever running a statewide campaign, is the fundraising. Because to be able to do a congressional seat on small dollar donations is infinitely more doable, right? Like it just is. And so how are you doing this financially, like fundraising? Like I assume you're staying away from corporate PAC money.
So we are, yes. So we're taking the view of we build a real grassroots, small dollar operation, appealing to people, moving around the state, being extremely visible, and from the idea that as this process goes along, the momentum picks up, and then other folks will get on board as we go. I mean, that has to be it, right? Because at the end of the day, there's not a whole cavalcade of big dollar donor cohorts sitting over here saying, "Hey, I'm excited I'm excited to throw my big dollars at the non-establishment insurgent candidacy of Hill Harbor." So
Right.
the good thing is this.
You mean
though.
the military industrial complex isn't lining up to give you donations?
No. Well, I'll tell you this. I've gotten, when you talk about the threat calls, because obviously, 21% of the world's fresh surface water supply touches Michigan shores, and I'm a massive advocate for clean water and clean energy and the like. And there's a big company here that has a great deal of financial influence in this state around pipelines. And if we were to see fossil fuel pipelines corrupt or destroy the Great Lakes, it would be one of the massive environmental losses in the world, and certainly a massive loss for Michigan. And so I've been threatened about talking about Enbridge, which is the company, and what they're doing in the Great Lakes. I mean, listen, we're 10 years outside of the Flint crisis, right? The 2024
I know.
represents 10 years. This community still hasn't gotten paid, still hasn't gotten compensated. This community still is suffering, and it is ridiculous. I mean, the idea that we can literally target and then do nothing to support communities just because they're poor, just because they have no agency, they have no ability to write checks, is, I mean, it's wrong on so many levels. But I believe, and this goes back to your question, that the money doesn't necessarily have to win. Everybody says, "Oh, if you can't get on TV, if you can't afford this," maybe I'm wrong. I may be wrong, and you may prove me to be wrong. But I believe that if you're able to touch people 1-to-1, and it becomes 2 to 4 to 8 to on and on and on. Folks aren't watching TV that much anymore. They're on their devices, they're scrolling, they're doing a lot of different things. Now, let me just say this: ever since I called for ceasefire, I think Instagram has shadow banned me, which so my engagement has gone down significantly, because I'd post a reel, we get some reels would get 70,000 likes, 100,000 likes, blah. Now my reels get 400 likes. I mean, it's just not getting distributed. So we have to figure out how to fight that. Right? It's hard to get beaten on the money, then also get shadow banned in social. Though that's a deadly combination, right?
Yeah.
We're shadow banned.
You can overcome certain money things
We are.
by messaging through social, but if you can't do that, that's a problem. So we're trying to figure out how to fix that problem.
So you know what? The way to fix that problem is that you need to be having like Bernie Barnstormers on college campuses and recruiting college students to be doing community service.
There is no shortage of that in the state of Michigan.
When you start creating a service army of people going around, not only do you attract the people that aren't voting because it just isn't worth it to them, you attract people that never even considered politics before, but they're just there because it's service. It's a way to keep a mission going. And the truth is then, as you know, this is about something so much bigger than if you win a seat. Like this is this big and you were referencing this organic movement, which I have been saying for years is so important, that if people actually came from organic movements and the movement had its own life, then it really would be a lot easier to control the electoral situation. Like it comes from the ground. Like we need to have that. But what happens is somebody decides, I want to run for office. And then somebody throws a lot of money behind them and then they're in that job. But that person has no organic connection to the community, to the people, to labor, to whatever. And I think that what you're doing is the way to win.
And we've seen massive wins here in Michigan. For instance, with labor. And, if I'm elected to the U.S. Senate, I'd be the only union member in the U.S. Senate, which is a shame, right? Just think about that. The U.S. Senate is supposed to be a representative body, and there is not one union member in the U.S. Senate. Okay, I'd be the only one. I would be the only member of the U.S. Senate with an elementary age child. Think about that. We're talking about people that are making decisions about education of our children, and they don't have kids in school.
No.
And so we have to think about what true representation looks like. And I think that you're absolutely right. Right now, we're in a point where the representation that we're finding are people specifically representing backdoor deals, the lunches that they have in DC at the swanky restaurants, and the types of things that happen. I mean, at the end of the day, when you peel back the onion and you realize that over 500,000 hours per year of our congressional members are made during the day on the people's time and the people's dime, making phone calls, dialing for dollars.
Yeah.
Then you say, well, that's why the system is pretty inefficient. No one's actually talking. No one's actually working together, trying to build real solutions for people. Imagine that. Passing laws, creating regulation, creating things that would protect people and actually help make their lives better. That's why you're absolutely right. It is about service. And if we can connect people to that, and so I like this idea, because I need your advice. You've run against the establishment. You run against an establishment candidate, and you've lived to tell the tale. So I need the advice about what you would have done differently to get that W. University of Michigan won the Rose Bowl yesterday.
We didn't even get a chance to touch on that, and I'm not going to subject you.
Go blue.
No, that's fine. I have no beef. My husband was actually born in Ann Arbor, and he'll say he's from there, even though he lived there for like a total of 3 months of his life. But he has always been a fan of the Wolverines. So, and I'm just not that into college ball unless the Buffaloes. I'm a Colorado Buffaloes, and that's because I went there.
Well, the truth be told, I'm a Scarlet Knight. So even though Rutgers,
is that Rutgers?
Yeah, there's
Rutgers. The Scarlet
Rutgers
Knights
is right there.
They're coming back. They're coming back.
See, we've given his team a little bit of a scare a couple of times the past couple of years. We're slowly working our way in. But you beat one of my two least favorite teams in all of college football, Alabama and Ohio State. So congratulations, you did a great job.
One of my childhood friends was a kicker for Michigan for a while. It was Remy Hamilton. Remy Hamilton.
Well, have Remy reach out to whoever.
I haven't talked to him in forever, but he went from there and he ended up in like arena football. So
there's your little knowledge.
There's my.
Jen's a diehard Dolphins fan, and I'm a little Giants fan in the corner right now because we're not doing too well. But the Lions are looking pretty good. Got to tell you,
Lions are looking great. First home playoff game since the 90s. Detroit. This place right here is going to be on fire.
I root for all things Michigan. I feel like somehow this country has abandoned your state, and that there are just so many things that are just need to be dealt with there, and I just feel for it. So and plus the Lions are sort of like this
underdog.
They're such an underdog.
Let's get into.
Sorry, I can't. Once you hit it, don't hit it again.
We don't. We had this.
Let me just say this: it's the most beautiful state in the country. It's the most livable. It's one of the most diverse. We got a large African American population, a large Arab population, a large immigrant population, a lot of white folks too, and so it's a lot of diversity, and it's also beautiful. You go into the Upper Peninsula. The Upper Peninsula is one of the most beautiful places in truly the world.
The Dingleweeds. That's the Dingleweeds. I had a professor in my grad program that was from there, and he referred to it as the Dingleweeds. But yes.
Yeah, some people believe it should have been Wisconsin, but it's Michigan.
So let's get into this. Obviously, the biggest issues in the state are environmental and economic.
How is it that they don't have clean water when they live in the middle of all the clean water?
But it's not just, obviously Flint is the eye of the hurricane, but there is a huge issue with the paper mill situation in Kalamazoo, another super blue area. But it's everywhere. It's Flint, it's Detroit, it's Saginaw. And there are
because it's working class people.
Yeah, so many of those blue collar cities are having these immense economic and environmental problems. And it's been that way for a very long time, and both parties
Yep.
are complacent in the plight that the people are suffering through right now. What do you intend to do as a U.S. Senator to change those fortunes for the people in those cities should you become the next senator from Michigan?
Well, great question. So a couple different things. You know, I want to be the 51st vote to end the filibuster. And so if we're really going to get big things done, if we're going to codify women's reproductive health and freedom, if we're going to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights and Advancement Act, if we're going to pass the PRO Act, protecting unions and the ability to organize, if we're going to get these big things done, we're going to have to get that done. And in the context of the Senate and the makeup of the Senate, in a 50-50 context, I think that there is a lot of opportunity to work with folks to respect what they want to get done, and if they respect the things that I want to get done. Certainly, for me, the environment is massive. So you mentioned the Kalamazoo, Flint. You can't forget about Benton Harbor had lead issues. There's a push to try to expand Camp Grayling, which is a base here that's surrounded by a hunting preserve. They want to push into that, but it's been a PFAS polluter for years, hasn't cleaned up its PFAS. And so these are real fights. And unless we elect people, just like I am not going to rubber stamp military expansion. That's not what I'm going to do. And just because the Pentagon comes and says we want to expand Camp Grayling, it's like, oh, it's just a hunting preserve around it. Let's no. Let's have Camp Grayling make sure they clean up PFAS that's been polluting the groundwater that's a forever chemical for years. You know, we're 49th out of 50th in growth. We lose a congressional district in Michigan every 10 years. You know, I drive to get home to my house in Detroit. I get off I-75. I come to a street called Oakland. This is in the north end of Detroit. I get to the corner of Oakland and Owen, and I almost break down crying every day because to the left of me is a bombed out, burnt out building. Across the street is a vacant lot. To the right of me there's a building that says Eli's Produce in faded letters, and there's a tree growing up through that building. Then across the street, of course, there's a brand new liquor store. Where if you're on Snap, the only thing you can buy are Funyuns, Faygo, or Vernors through 3 inches of plexiglass, and we're collectively acting like this is okay. And you can't find any fresh produce for 3-4 miles around in this community, and we're acting like that's okay. Yet at the same time, we have farmers here in Michigan, not but about an hour and a half from here, that are looking to sell what they make, right? And so clearly, there are ways that we can solve these problems and we can make things work for everybody. I'm much more interested in unifying people, bringing people together, having people work together and creating common solutions that work for everybody than this idea of making everyone else the villain so I can raise money off their villainy. You know, and that's another reason why, you know, I'm a ardent campaign finance reform supporter, want to get rid of Citizens United. Another reason why we have to end the filibuster. If we're going to get that done, and everybody who's in office tells me, Hill, that'll never happen. Why? And they say this obviously quietly. They say, because I benefit from it. We benefit from it. If you're in office, it makes it almost impossible for someone else to win.
You know, I just thought of something really interesting. Like, what you have an opportunity to use your campaign. Like, I'm sitting here and thinking about you. If there's this burned out lot and there's all these places and you have farmers, you should use your platform and your campaign to connect the farmers with local volunteers in the cities. And those places that are just abandoned could be totally good community gardens. The kinds of places that are empty are the kinds of places where you can, you know, build I don't know. I just feel like there's a way for you to use your campaign to get healthy produce to people and have that.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. So I was talking to a single mom who's at the corner of Mack and Drexel here in Detroit, East Side. And I was also talking to a farmer kind of Midland, Michigan. And you know, the farmer has been convinced that, you know, he should vote for one party. No, absolutely. And this single mom doesn't vote, but if she did, she'd been convinced that she should vote for the Democratic Party, but yet they expressed the exact same desires. They want a safe place for their kids to go to school. They want a living wage. They want affordable health care. They want all these things. And he wants a place to sell his produce. She wants healthy food in her community. And so the idea was exactly that. How could I connect these two people? If I can undergird this farmer with some measure of federal support, but part of that requires that farmer to come in and sell at a pop-up or a farmer's market in this community, all of a sudden this community has affordable produce that they can get, and it's there, and starts to create a proof point of a market. Because right now there are a couple of people that I know that have tried to reopen Eli's Produce, but of course they can't get a loan. That's, it's hard money loan, 10 to 15%. There's no way you can stay in business. However, what we're seeing is when many of these communities do choked out, a developer can now come in, do 3-4 blocks of it with incentives as well as a 0-1% loan. And all of a sudden they've created, and you say, well, how come for 40 years, individuals who live in that community can't get lending to open up small businesses?
Right.
But all of a sudden, a major developer can come and level the entire, and it looks completely different, but none of those people can stay. So when we talk about affordable housing, when we talk about healthcare, we talk about inflation and all these things, these are the things that I have, because these are the things that I believe a senator can actually impact someone's dinner table. And, we put these senators on pedestals rather than saying, no, you're a senator of service. You have to impact my dinner table. What does that look like? It means that I can't afford gas. It means that I can't afford healthcare. It means that I don't have a living wage. $7.25 minimum wage in 2012. Fast forward to 2024, $7.25. Does that get the job done? Is that fair? Where are we, and who's making those decisions?
That's an excellent point. And then the other issue, of course, is you have sort of a unique opportunity because Michigan is an open primary state. So you can appeal to basically any and all voters that are in the state.
How luxurious.
Yeah, really. Well, we don't have that in Florida.
How luxurious.
Florida's close by.
Yes, but let me just say this. You once you walk in there, you can't cross vote. So you're right.
Yeah.
Since
we're going to be
at the,
you pick a slate at the ballot.
You pick a ballot, right?
Right,
you pick a ballot.
Right.
So this Senate seat will be at the top of those ballots, and either you flip over to the Republican side and you vote for the Republicans, or you flip over. So yes, I'm working as hard as I can to appeal to every voter to go on and pull a Democratic primary ballot when it comes August 6th.
I'm embarrassed to say I've never been to Michigan.
Really?
Oh,
I've been to the airport in Detroit, which it doesn't count. So that's why I'm not counting it. I have a plan.
Listen, you're welcome to come. We can you can do your show from here. It could be a live, on the ground, generational change in Michigan.
I plan on circumnavigating Lake Michigan. I've already done Lake Ontario, and so I have this thought. So I will eventually. That's one of my plans, and I very much want to go to the Dingleweeds. So because I know how pretty it is there, and So I've never.
And Debbie Dingle is a great congresswoman. So
really,
yeah, actually, she is. Yeah, and I would add, it's funny bringing that up. Obviously, we're not in the business of bashing opponents or candidates. There's no point to it, but there obviously is. There's a deep concern that I've noticed, particularly in the Democratic Party, even more so than the Republican Party the last few years. One, if not what you would call chosen candidate of the establishment, has very deep ties to the military-industrial complex, and that is a very big problem. Whether you've been involved with the CIA or whatever it is that you do, that's not an anomaly. This seems to be something that's been happening quite frequently with the Democratic Party.
And that's his primary opponent you're talking
about. One of. I can't say for all of them. We know who, he knows who I'm talking about. We're not going to mention the name.
No.
But the point is, I think that there is a huge problem with not addressing the fact that we have an over-militarized domestic and foreign policy. And by perpetuating that narrative and continuing this idea that, more bars, more walls, more guns, if you will, is going to solve the problem, it's not. You're not going to solve the problems of Detroit by putting more cops on the beat. They're not going to solve that problem in Flint either. If this isn't a focus on the economic plight of working people, then there is no point. But I do think that there is a great cause for concern because of the fact that that's been happening. How do you see it in regards to the way that the Democratic Party has shifted in a way that needs to be brought back to its roots, if you will, of the FDR and JFK days?
I think you're absolutely right. I think one thing you could point to is look at that Barbara Lee, Mark Pocan bill. The people they it's called the People Over the Pentagon. I hate to say what I'm about to say. It's a drop in the bucket. It was like $100 billion reduction, right? Which is literally a drop in the bucket as far as military spending. And you could just look how people were scared to even get involved, in that. Many, not all. But, when we think about, we can always seemingly in this country always find money for violence, but
Oh, yeah.
money for early childhood education, which we know is one of the best investments that any government can make. It pays you back eightfold on the back end by actually having productive citizens that create jobs, that open up businesses, that serve communities, that also don't get locked up, so you don't have to deal with them on the backside. There's so many more efficiencies and efficient ways to spend. And remember, what we often forget, and I don't hear enough politicians talking about, it's the people's money. That $6.2 trillion federal annual budget is not the government's money. It's the people's money. And so therefore, they're being bad fiduciaries of the people's money because they're not spending it in support of the people. And so let's go to the fact that, in US Congress, you can insider trade. And if you look and peel back the onion again about how many congressional members hold military stock. And so if you're able to know that you're about to do a massive appropriations and Boeing or Lockheed, or Raytheon, or you name it, is going to be the beneficiary. And then as soon as you walk out of that meeting, you can buy Boeing, Raytheon, Lockheed stock. Does that not suggest that there are problematic incentives there? Using other people's money to pump a company that you can then personally benefit from? Come on, right?
No, look. You're speaking my language, and when we're talking about all the militarization, I can't help but think that Detroit and that area is a right type of place for a cop city to pop up. And when I think about what's going on in Georgia, and I don't understand why neither of those senators seem to be really standing on behalf of what's right for their people. And it must be some sort of financial connection to some of the incentives that are around Cop City. And you seem like somebody that would stand up for your people and not allow Cop City to be built in your state.
And listen, my father was a psychiatrist who did mental health work inside of prisons. And I wrote a book called Letters to an Incarcerated Brother. I do and have done a great deal of work inside of our system and know how broken those systems are and know how difficult it is. And, this is going out. You asked me some of the things I want to do. One thing, there is no pathway right now to federal expungements, right? You got to get the president to sign a commutation.
Yeah.
It is ridiculous, the fact that we have over-incarcerated people. We have situations where prosecutors can have the ability to lay on charges, to force pleas, and then you can't get them anything. There's no pathway to expungement, and this follows you the rest of your life. I believe that your so-called criminal record should be sealed. Once you've done your time, you've done your parole, probation, etc., it is finished. You've done what you've done. It should be sealed and done. Now, obviously, it can be reopened if there's a future trial or a future situation. But as far as moving forward with your life, the fact that we literally give lifetime penalties and we over-incarcerate poor communities to the degree that we do, it is truly lifetime sentencing. And that has to be reformed. And my father had a conditional release program before he passed away that was one of the first of its kind, and I was so proud of him and of it. And he would talk about the people he would work with and the fact that these folks, but for the grace of God, there go I, right? So it's you know, we can do so much better, and we have to. I mean,
Yeah.
we have to.
People don't get that. And this is something, and I talk about it all the time, the importance of the collective. And of course, then I get called communist, whatever. But when I'm talking about the importance of the collective, it's like, how can we be doing well when we're treating the least of these the way we treat the least of these? Like, we're never going to be anything greater than how we treat the least of these. And I don't understand how people don't see that, other than mass amounts of propaganda and capitalistic media that pumps this shit in our heads that life is a pie and you got to get yours. And if someone gets some, then they're taking it from you. And, you know, and this is like forever a problem. You know, I mean, I appreciate that you care a lot about criminal justice. I've done criminal defense work. And I actually went to law school thinking I was going to come out and work for Barry Scheck at the Innocence Project. That was my dream. But, you know, things take us in different directions.
Well, I was national ambassador for the Innocence Project right before COVID, and so I spent a year being able to travel around and talk about the Innocence Project and the great work that they do. And you know, we have effectively allowed communities to become crippled by a double whammy. We've underfunded public education and really raked these communities, and then we have overfunded mass incarceration. And what happens is it's created just massive amounts of harm in these communities. And the thing is that folks are super resilient. Folks are super creative, and that's why, as people talk about even this Senate race, and they say, well, Hill, and it was a similar point that you made, Jen. How can you overcome someone that is, you know, raising money at the rate that my opponent raises? And how can you overcome that? And the way you do it is the people decide. And here's the beautiful thing about it, is that we believe there's a really strong path here by stitching together communities that don't always necessarily vote together, but in this particular primary, we think they will. For instance, the African American community in Michigan, it's very vast, it's very large, it just doesn't tend to turn out. So we have to get the voting turnout out. Then you have a large immigrant community, an Arab community, and then you have a large progressive community. You know, remember Bernie won here in 2016, and so you have a large progressive, but they've been kind of dormant, and they were kind of Bernie adjacent, and they've kind of sort of given up a little bit. So we got to get them back in. And then you have environmentalists, and then you have this independent voter that votes both Republican or Democrat depending on who the candidate is. And I think that there's a number of independents. You know, I'm a small business owner. I have a coffee shop in downtown Detroit. And so there's a number of independent voters that like the fact that I'm very big into creating community-based jobs and supporting economic development and small business. And so you start to stitch those groups together in a Democratic primary in Michigan, and it becomes a pretty powerful group. And I think that's what we're doing. And to your point, we don't have to agree on everything. That's the big fallacy. The true opposition, a lot of them disagree on 9 things. They agree on 1 thing, and they're like, "Let's go storm it," you know. And you know, and then, but it seems like on our side, it's like, you know, I agree with them on 9 out of 10, but that 1 thing, I can't work with you. You know,
yes,
like, come on, y'all.
That's a left. That is definitely a problem. It is and I can't stand that.
Well, let's conclude on a high note, because if there is one thing that does unite the left, probably better than anything else, it is definitely labor.
If we lived in Michigan, I'd be campaigning for you.
Yeah, you have.
I would, and unfortunately, in Florida here, there isn't anybody really worth campaigning for.
Well, that's Florida. Let's not make the rest of the country.
I'm just saying,
Florida.
it's like, I'm just saying.
They figured out DeSantis. You know, but that's probably the best thing we could say. But from the labor perspective, obviously, we're both, and Jen especially, huge fans of Shawn Fain and the UAW and what they've accomplished. And on a personal level, you know, being part of SAG-AFTRA, and you know, we've had plenty of your colleagues on, most notably, you know, Francis Fisher has been a real champion of the labor movement. Particularly when it comes to the writers and the actors. I think there is this resurgence, if you will, of the labor movement in this country, which is great to see. And I'm curious as to how that is playing a role in your campaign as we go forward. Because if there is one lane that I think you can occupy better than any other candidate running in Michigan right now, it is the labor
Yeah.
lane.
Without question. So I was elected to the national board of my union by the entire union years ago, and I proudly served in that role for 4 years, and it was something I was very proud of. And to be a union organizer and an activist, even when you look at it from the African American community perspective, in communities where African Americans historically have had high union membership, the wealth gap is at its lowest. And so there's no question that fighting for living wage and being part of a labor movement impacts communities in so many positive ways. Yet we've seen across the country money being pumped into right to work states, money being pumped into ways to sort of suppress labor and suppress unions. So what do we have to do? We have to pass the PRO Act. Okay, and what does that include? It includes giving the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, real teeth. Right now, they don't have any teeth. Giving OSHA real teeth. What does real teeth mean? It means monetary sanctions that are significant. And so that striking doesn't become the only lever that can be pulled, because it's, a strike is an extreme lever. My union was on strike. I was on strike this year. You don't have any income, right? And so striking is a very difficult lever, but it's an extreme lever. There should be steps in between, and that's the NLRB and OSHA, all these institutions, federal institutions, having the ability to have real monetary sanctions that can get distributed, doesn't just end up in the federal government. Let's actually distribute it to the affected workers, right? And so a penalty, it's just like we were talking about sports earlier. If someone has to pay a fine, the fine needs to go to who was harmed, right? And so in this case, the workers are being harmed by those practices, and therefore that money that the NLRB or OSHA can get should get distributed to the workers. But so how do we pass the PRO Act? As if I'm elected to the U.S. Senate, I'd be the only union member, as I said before, and we need a union voice at that table. And I believe we could get a number of Republican colleagues and a number of Democratic colleagues to get to 51 on that. I do believe that. I think that
the PRO Act gets rid of right to work, right?
Correct.
That was my
PRO Act gets rid of right to work.
Right, because we're stuck in right to work. So for us, that's the sort of non-starters. Until that happens, we're useless here. So that's.
And if you want to talk about something that the Triple Blue leadership here in Michigan has done, is this year we've been able to get rid of right to work, and they did a great job with that.
Yep.
And so that you can see that happen, but the PRO Act will come and supersede that, because it gives a lot of power to organize, or ability to organize to individuals, and it takes away the ability to suppress organizing.
You're damn right.
So Peter, the union piece is a huge win, and I think it proves to people that when you fight, you do win, and capitalizing on that movement and being a part of it. I certainly hit more strike lines than any other candidate by far. In fact, I believe SEIU Healthcare, I just found out, is striking in Royal Oak, Michigan, and I may, certainly before the end of this week, be out there with them. I try to take pizzas, I try to take food out, I try to strike, and then also gloves and hats, because it's cold now. So to be on a strike line right now is hard. I mean, it's hard to strike, period. But there's a big difference between striking in Hollywood and striking in Royal Oak, Michigan in January.
That's true.
It's a different thing.
But it also shows a level of commitment that upper Midwesterners really have, that a lot of the rest of the country could really learn about. And you really embody that, and we are definitely pulling for you. It's not a question about, the rest of the candidates in the race. You simply stand out, and that really means a lot. And we need generational change right now.
You can't help yourself.
I can't help myself. You got to plug where you can. How can people find you? How can people get involved in your campaign?
So To the earlier point that's been made, everybody, these campaigns, and particularly a statewide campaign, cannot function. We can't organize. We can't hire field. We can't do all the things unless we have donations. And so please go to hillharper.com and whatever you can do. If you can do $5, $2, $1, $10, $100, $3,300, whatever you can do would be a huge help to our campaign. And it's massive. And it goes directly to our statewide effort. There's 83 counties in Michigan, so it's a big state, and we believe that we can speak to everybody across the state, and if we have your help to get there. So Hill, the other thing you can do is text. We're finding that people, in terms of organizing, and Jen, this speaks to the movement, what you were talking about earlier, that a number of people, just based on the situation they're in and their economic status and what they do, they tend to text a lot more than necessarily go online, emails, etc.
Yeah.
So here's a number that anybody can text: 313-942-4455. That's 313-942-4455. And that allows you, if you text that, you'll join our community. You'll get an auto response back from me real quick, and you put in your information, and then we can stay in touch with you based off your interest and what you do. And then what we're hoping to do as we build this community via text, this basically texting community, we can do the things that you were talking about earlier, Jen, this idea of as other candidates come along, they're not starting from zero in different areas. It's like, hey, Hill, who's a part of this community in zip code 48202? Boom, here are all the 48202 folks. And so this allows people to get engaged. These are the people who want to knock doors, or they want to do this, or they just want to potentially give a donation. There's a place or a way to fit into this campaign, whether you go and do emails, or you go online and surf the web, or if you just text. So everybody's welcome.
Yeah, I guys, even if you can't help, and I don't, it's hard because during election season, there are other races, there's other people, but Michigan is very important. Michigan can really use the help.
Yes.
And so if you're gonna, go, and quite honestly, even if you spend no money, go text and help. And just, if
Please.
every single person on here texted 10 people in Michigan, that would be very helpful. So
Absolutely.
Go on and just text and help. And then if the texts get too annoying, you can opt out of them, but just make sure that you go on and text and help.
You've got endless amount of universities: Michigan, Michigan State, Western Michigan, Eastern Michigan,
Grand Valley State. Yeah.
Grand Valley State. There again.
Wayne State. I can't forget Wayne State. It's
Wayne
4
State,
miles from my house.
Hit
They'll
the
get mad at me.
colleges.
Yeah.
Hit the colleges.
Yeah, Michigan.
Yeah, there's 93 colleges and universities in Michigan. There's 1,800 high schools. Every senior in Michigan high school this year, virtually every senior can vote. And so we're really want to target and talk to young people.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. We're hitting the colleges. We're doing a college tour. We're hitting the high schools. And so, it's exciting. This truly is just grassroots, boots on the ground.
Be fun and give them treats. And no,
Okay.
this is.
I hope we can afford the treats. That's the thing. We need people's
No.
donations. If you want to feed a college student, donate to the Hill Harper campaign.
Yeah, no, but it's seriously, that's how you get them. You'll be like the Pied Piper.
Yeah.
Pizza. Telling you, lots of pizza.
Hill Harper, thank you so much. Best of luck,
Thank
and we
you,
will
both of
definitely be
you.
talking down the road.
Keep up the good work.
Thanks,
Thank you so
Al.
much. Thanks.
Appreciate you. That was a great conversation.
He was lovely.
And of course, we
He
know
was
that these
lovely.
grassroots campaigns is really where it's at. And this is a campaign.
He was great. That's
Yeah.
that's a particularly amazingly good Senate candidate for
Yes.
you people in Michigan.
Yes. And the fact that he's doing it on principle means everything.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure, again, that's
We've never had a Senate candidate like that.
not the first time that he has probably been.
They probably tried to make him an offer at Carolfields, and they didn't take the offer. I could have done that one.
Not only did he not take the offer.
That's right.
Okay, let me tell you something. I got everything I needed to know about that guy in like the first 5 minutes of our conversation. Not only did he not take the money and take the offer, he didn't tell anybody except he called the congresswoman and told her. That's honor. That's honor. And it's just like, and I don't think like if I wasn't in this business for this amount of time, I would necessarily catch that or think of that or notice that. I assure you that is not typical.
No.
And the fact that he did that, I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, that's somebody I would work with. That's somebody who has a certain amount of integrity that people can work with and get things done. I find that very impressive.
Remember, a similar situation happened to Summer Lee in Pittsburgh when she was trying to win her first congressional seat. She had been a state rep. She had been doing a great grassroots campaign. And then all of a sudden, she decided that she wasn't going to walk the line for AIPAC. And they picked, I don't remember if the guy was a complete no-name, but I know that he wasn't somebody who was of any real note. And they pumped like $4 or $5 million behind him to try to knock her off. Now, she won a race, but not by that big of a margin.
I think that makes her vulnerable.
I think that makes any candidate vulnerable because that money, it's basically unlimited. When you think about it, think about the we talk about the affluent Jewish class, the people that basically are the biggest funders to the Ivy League institutions, like Mr. Wexler at Harvard, and specifically said, you're not getting any more of my money unless you do exactly what my Zionist playbook tells you to do. And they're going to cave. Now, will people who are voting cave? That remains to be seen. But the institutions that live off of rich aristocrats' money, oh, they're going to cave.
And the problem is those institutions and those outlets are the ones that are pumping out the information. So when you say, are the voters going to cave? The voters are really only as good as they're willing to seek information.
That's true.
And that's the thing. So if somebody only watches like mainstream or whatever it is, then your perspective is going to be very different.
Michigan is a particularly unique state for higher education, always has been. University of Michigan is one of the best public Ivy institutions in the nation, and all the other schools that come along with it are substantial. People actually go to Michigan, not just people who live in Michigan. So having the ability to go to, I think 93 is the number, between junior colleges, NAIA, Division 3, 2, and 1.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I do it in sports terminology. Forgive me for doing that. But you're talking about a very substantial amount of student body. Potentially 93, I guess.
You don't like my music. The reason you hear about him here is because he is being shadow banned and subjected to media blackout.
I'll say her name now that we're not interviewing him anymore. But the name is Alyssa Slotkin.
Is that who's running against him?
I saw
another gentleman that was running for you.
Doesn't matter. Alyssa Slotkin is the establishment's choice. She is a congresswoman from Michigan. She is a former member of the CIA, among other things. She's also the most morose, unappealing candidate you could possibly imagine.
And we're talking about an AIPAC supporter.
So yeah. You're going to get what you're going to get.
But everybody spread it. So if all of you here, if everybody just seriously go to Hill Harper's website and just forward it to some people that might be that you think might be interested in, I don't know, helping spread democracy.
I'll tell you why, Ted, because we are a shadow ban channel, and that's why we have to basically do this all grassroots. And since
it's on me. I started it this way though. Yeah. Like we came out our first year and I did like a telethon for Julian Assange. That basically set the direction. That's our trajectory. And then over a year ago, I did the first episode in Deconstructing Zionism series, which that got us, where that got us.
Yeah.
So, that's the problem. That's our,
And since we are
that's our hill to
grassroots,
climb.
any and all support that you provide is tremendously appreciated.
Yeah, for sure.
Tony, thank you so much for becoming a YouTube member.
Tony D.
Tony's been with us since the very, very beginning. And however long it takes, we are extremely grateful for anyone.
The kind of cool thing about being small, though, is that we know our people.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, I actually don't, I don't mind that. I mean, I obviously it would be the more people, the more news, the more, information out there would be better. But I kind of like if we had 1,000 people watching, we wouldn't be able to sit here and follow chat.
Well, that's why we would have a mod and they would pinpoint all of our people because we do recognize
we know our people.
Sandra Looney. Thank you for becoming a YouTube member.
Thank you,
Very
Sandra.
much appreciate it. And so, for those of you who obviously appreciate our work.
Do you know that they call coins loonies in Canada?
I did not know that.
Yeah, there's loonies and toonies. And I don't know, are there any Canuckies out there? Help me out. But there's something to do with like a quarter is a loony.
If you are so inclined, please go over to patreon.com/generational change. For as little as $5 a month, you can become a supporter of our small but mighty channel. We recommend Patreon because they do not take what Google, YouTube takes.
And yet we like members there too, and it makes it fun for you guys.
You can also reach Jen directly.
That's true. I do give that as a selling point. People, if you join us on Patreon, you get direct one-on-one, basically messaging with me.
And if you are so inclined but don't want to put your credit card on the grid, you could go to Cash App, $JenChange. Any amount that you contribute there is tremendously appreciated. Remember, we are a small but mighty channel, but this gives us the opportunity to interview some very noted people.
Yeah.
Hill Harper is an exceptional candidate.
I wish we had somebody.
He's really, really good.
Seriously, a labor person.
And you know what? It doesn't hurt that he's been a noted actor on TV. You know how to conduct. Well, yes, but you know what? The proof is always in the pudding. You could be an actor and be a complete douche just knowing how to put on a show. But his labor credentials speak for themselves. The fact that he was willing to turn down $20 million in corporate money speaks for itself.
And he didn't say anything.
No.
That's pretty impressive.
So to me, that is the mark of a candidate who really knows what needs to be done.
But no, seriously, if people have any interest in communicating with me, I am not on social media. I do not do our social media. That is Peter. So if you DM me, it's him. And he's nice. He's nice, more or less. He's all right.
But you can find Jen.
You can find me on Patreon.
Yes. And you can find her here in the chat.
Yeah. I do my best to respond. Sometimes I get caught up in the chat and he gets all pissed off at me for getting caught up in the chat. I try to respond. I'd be happy to do Q&A or whatever, because I'm willing to talk about what anybody else is really willing to talk about most of the time. I don't really care.
Well, we are going to talk about Mr. Trump because
we have to talk about the Trumpists. We've got to talk about the Trumpists.
He's being thrown off the ballot again. This time in the state of Maine, even though the state of Colorado has already determined that, that's really not constitutional.
You can't just do that.
And when I hear people say, but he's this and he's that and he's this,
then get a charge, get a conviction, and then you might have a leg to stand on.
And even then, you might not. And you know why?
Correct.
Because Eugene Debs ran for president in 1920 from prison. And he's still, and this is 1920, and he's still got, I think, 1.5 million votes.
No, I think that it's like, if people would spend all of their anti-Trump energy doing something productive.
They can't. It's too
I really feel like we could change the world. I've never seen the amount of effort, energy, and vigor that people put into hating Trump that I have never seen any of those people put into anything else in their lives. And I know so many people like that. It's so interesting to me. It's like, if you put that, even 1/10 of that passion into something productive or charitable, we'd be better off.
But this is what we talk about when we say that and again, it's not liberal media, it's corporate liberal media.
Yeah, it's not that it's liberal.
Very important that we distinguish.
It's all capital.
Correct.
It doesn't matter. It's all the same. All roads lead to the same plutocrats.
When the Boston Globe, which is, the poor man's version of the New York Times or the Washington Post. Sorry, I got to dig Boston a little bit. In defense of Maine Secretary of State Sheena Bellows' courageous decision to keep Trump off the ballot. Keep in mind, Massachusetts is a state that has decided that they are not conducting a Democratic primary either, like Florida. They're just awarding Massachusetts.
Oh.
Yeah, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has decided that there is no primary process. We're just choosing who we want. And yet this somehow is democracy. Bellows defended her decision in the face of predictable threats that came after Donald Trump posted her biographical data.
He is such a ridiculous buffoon.
He is.
She's really terrible. You should totally find her.
It irritates me to no end that we have to sit here and be defending that buffoon in reference to existence of democracy. This is the most, I'm actually sitting here thinking they're wrong for keeping the buffoon off the bat. This is just not the world I thought it would be.
On December 28th, Maine became the second state in the nation to order Donald Trump removed from its presidential primary ballot. Yeah, they really have that habit. Following the December 19th ruling from the Colorado Supreme Court, keep in mind this has now been overturned in Colorado, Maine Secretary of State Sheena Bellows issued a 34-page decision that concluded the U.S. Constitution does not tolerate an assault on the foundations of our government, and Maine law requires me to act in response. Bellows' decision enacted in word and deed the too rarely remembered reality that the fair interpretation and faithful application of statutory as well as constitutional law is entrusted no less to executives than to judges, and that the U.S. system for electing presidents expressly empowers state legislatures to decide how each state's election is to be made. And she deliberately refused to abdicate her responsibility to make a call, a responsibility that her state legislature specifically delegated to her. I don't know about you, but if you're looking around at the state of this country right now, what you're doing is trying to drive as deep a wedge between the American people as you can possibly drive.
Well, they're sending people over to Trump.
Correct.
Because you're making him the martyr completely. I mean, but I thought that the first time around with all the news and all this stuff, like, you know, in 16, it was like that. In 16, it was like, he got so much free advertising. I mean, you people just do not get it. You just don't get it. But I mean, and the truth is, does anybody care about Maine anyway?
Well, it's not even that Maine. Well, you see, the thing is,
I agree with Michael. And that's what I've said. These are private clubs in each state. They could do whatever the hell they want. And the fact that people who are club members get disappointed by that, your option is get out of the club. But that's just the way it is. But as far as the state secretary of state removing somebody from a ballot, that's a whole different issue. That's a different issue to me. That's not a private club. That's a secretary of state. That means that literally that state's tax dollars are paying for that person to tell you who can and cannot be on your ballot. That's unacceptable.
I do not reach this conclusion lightly. Democracy is sacred. I am mindful that
Clearly
no Secretary of State has ever deprived a presidential candidate of ballot access based on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. I am also mindful, however, that no presidential candidate has ever before engaged in insurrection. Again, you are making a decision that is supposed to be made at the federal level, not the state level. And by doing that, you are perpetuating this divide that this country can no longer stand on.
Okay, so to any of my legal people out there, like I'm sitting
Let the
here
lawyer talk.
as a legal person, like, and I get very in the minutia of the language of it. So anybody out there, if you don't see the irony of this, so she's kicking him off the ballot under the guise of the 14th Amendment. Okay. The 14th Amendment is the basis of what we call due process. In the same sentence that she's kicking him off of the ballot for violating the 14th Amendment, she's doing so without he never had due process. So his entire 14th Amendment rights have been violated in this. See, here's the thing, all right? The rights are our rights. They're individual rights that protect us from the government. Okay, she is doing something based on something where he wasn't given due process. She is in violation of Donald Trump's 14th Amendment rights. And yet that is what she is citing to keep him off the ballot. So that's sort of my little legal lingo for today. Do you see what, like, how ridiculous that is? And she's stating that he engaged in an insurrection when he has not been convicted or charged with doing so.
Bellows minces no words on the question of whether Trump engaged in insurrection or rebellion. The record establishes that Mr. Trump, over the course of several months and culminating on January 6, 2021, used a false narrative of election fraud to inflame his supporters and direct them to the Capitol to prevent certification of the 2020 election and the peaceful transfer of power. Okay.
So now what we're saying is that the Secretary of State can supersede the entire judicial branch and declare somebody guilty of a crime without them being tried. That's what that is. Because if she, and it's so ironic because, again, that's a violation of the 14th Amendment. So anyway, you all,
the problem that we have
that's where
that
I'm
no one really wants to address here, and all too often we become very tribal in our political discourse, and that's a huge problem. I am not going to do that because the truth of the matter is our election system, for the most part, is rigged. It's rigged in many different ways. You want to say that big tech had favorability towards Joe Biden over Donald Trump? I think mostly anybody would give that agreement, would say that that's a fair assessment.
Wait, that who?
That big tech.
Oh.
That the major social media conglomerate machine that we have in this country favored Joe Biden.
Oh,
over
yeah,
Donald
for sure.
Trump in the
Yeah,
election.
of course.
If you want to say that that's election meddling, you could. You also can reference the 2016 election and all that proceeded over the next 4 years, where the Democratic Party tried to move heaven and earth to get the Electoral College voters to switch their vote from Trump to Hillary Clinton. Then they proceeded to say that the Russians won the election for Donald Trump, and they stayed on that for 4 years. For 4 years. Basically just assuming that everyone would be okay with you saying that he is an illegitimate president and is, in fact, committing treason, that we don't actually have an actual commander-in-chief, that this person was installed by a foreign nation and they never let up on this shit, no matter how many various debunking circumstances, including what happened with Mr. Mueller. And even then they wouldn't stop.
No.
And they're still doing it.
Right. But
so
it's ridiculous.
My attitude has always been, when it comes to the Democrats and Republicans, when it comes to getting in the mud of the worst of the political discourse, you will never beat the Republicans at this game. They will always beat you.
And actually, mark my words, in whatever lawsuit is filed in Maine, it will be based on a violation of his 14th Amendment rights. So that's just I just think that that's just very ironic.
And all the while you have spent all of this time, all of this money, all of these resources, whether it was defending Hunter Biden, whether it was never acknowledging the fact that the one thing you could have went after Trump on that would have sealed his fate was his violation of the Emoluments Clause, because every one of you scum do it too.
Right, that's why they couldn't do it that way.
Go after him on something that actually had tangibility, but you just completely are like, oh no, he paid off a porn star. Oh, he was messing around with classified documents. It's like,
they just can't.
You're
But you know
so
what? Every
desperate.
time they do it, all it does is you keep proving him right, that you're chasing him and witch hunting him. Like, all it does is prove him right.
The perception to the general population is that I don't like Trump, but I'm going to support him if it means it's going to stick it to you guys.
Yes. That's how sanctimonious and annoying they seem when they do this stuff.
But they know it and they don't care, because when you live in the
He's going to get back on the ballot.
Yeah, he's already back on the ballot in Colorado.
He's going to get back on that. You
Like,
can't do that. Attention, Secretary of State. Clearly not a legal background, okay? You can't just do that. And yes, I mean, obviously you can, but you won't be able to withstand any judicial scrutiny for that.
Yeah.
So I don't, like, he'll get back on the ballot, and all you're doing is making him look like the victim. That's the only thing this is doing. It's they have really run out of ideas.
And with that all being said, it is being done because our economy is collapsing, our environment, our planet is on fire. We do not have honest, free, and fair elections. The Democratic Party has proven for the third time now that there is no honest primary process. And you're never going to have one.
No.
Not at the presidential level. At the local level, they have less of control over that. But at the presidential level, when everything's on the line.
Locally, it's a little bit different. Locally, It's more like at the regional level, they'll throw tons of money and they'll do all sorts of like ghosting and propaganda, but they can't flat out say, oh no, we're just not having a primary, right? Like that's not something that.
Let me tell you something. Even though we're members of the Democratic Party, the idea that you think that there is anything democratic about a party that has super delegates, which is basically a fortress to block any real change from happening, you have no leg to stand on. None. You have none. And you will never be able to defend it. And the thing that makes the super delegates all the more pathetic when you consider how absolutely corporate bought the party really is, you look no further than the people who are super delegates. You know, it would be one thing if it was simply lobbying your elected representatives that happen to be super delegates. But no, it's members of Raytheon and Boeing and Lockheed Martin. That's who's super delegates in the Democratic. Oh yeah, these are bureaucrats, non-elected people of the corporate order that get to decide exactly how our democracy will move forward in the Democratic Party.
See, I think every year there should be a lottery amongst everybody who's in the Democratic Party. And if you win that lottery, you get to be a superdelegate. Now, if you had that process for picking the superdelegates, then the idea of superdelegates wouldn't bother me as much. But it's still just the whole concept of it is really just so elitist.
Now, even though Travers is making a quip here, the fact of the matter is there are a lot of people who will vote for him, even if he's in prison.
Oh, yes. No, and honestly,
that's not a joke.
No,
like,
it isn't. And the group of people that's getting larger and larger, angrier and angrier, that is just willing to burn this whole thing down, is getting bigger.
Oh, absolutely.
That's really ultimately
and
what
then
the problem is.
And then on top of everything else, you have a president right now.
Yeah, you did, right, Teresa? Yeah, we've been. Yeah.
And so right now we are at the precipice of a very extremely dangerous situation, because you have a president who has now shown his true colors beyond any shadow of a doubt. All the things that we talked about, whether it was the $15 minimum wage, whether it was expanding universal health care in an emergency situation during a pandemic.
He couldn't get that done, but he was able to get extra aid to Israel.
Whether it was canceling student debt, whether it's canceling medical debt, whether it's expunging nonviolent drug offender records, whether it is decriminalizing cannabis, whether it is ending all wars. And I could go on. But he has the authority to do this. And you know how I know he does? Because he just did it. And so if you're going to continue to believe that we can't have these things because it's the law, no, the law says that the commander-in-chief has the authority when the legislative branch is not doing its job.
Which is daily.
The executive branch has the legal authority, as given by the judicial branch, to do what is necessary to have functioning government. And he's not doing that.
No, because he's not functioning.
Probably not. So don't say we didn't tell you so.
No, and there are a lot of like sort of wild cards out there. And so that does change things up again. I think RFK.
Welcome to the new year, Sable.
Hey, happy New Year, Sable. I don't think RFK, I think he's kind of on a downward trajectory in terms of polling right now. I don't know.
It's happened in other countries. You think that this hasn't happened?
First of all, that's all. And here's the thing: when you know that the president isn't actually the person truly in charge, it makes complete sense as to how they can do that from prison. They're not the person in charge anyway. So they're the figurehead. So it would be like the figurehead is sitting in jail. That's fine, but everybody else is still running shit and doing shit.
So we've got one last thing to do before we go.
And what do we have?
Well, we have to, somebody has to come and make a statement.
I don't want to hear from him. Oh God, it's so gross. It's so gross.
I just have to come on here and defend my honor, Jen. How you doing? For those of you who think that I'm going to really care very much about my name coming out in the next few days, I can assure you I have dodged every conceivable bullet since I have been in public life. And I'll continue to dodge them going forward. So if you have any intention of seeing me go down as a result of this Epstein list that's going to be coming out, I can assure you I ain't going nowhere. In fact, I'm just going to continue to live my life as if nothing's ever happened. Am I right?
Yeah. Chris predicting a bait and switch after the primaries. Yeah, we've talked about that. I think that's definitely a possibility. And we see like them getting like Newsom ready in the bench area.
Oh, that's for sure. And I might have a say or two in that. Let me just be sure to let
They could put up whoever they want.
Oh, listen, they could put me up again and I'd probably win. Isn't that amazing?
They could put up whoever they want. Short of them putting up Dolly Parton, I don't see how I would ever support that.
I have said this before and I will say it again. I did not have sexual relations with those kids.
Ugh.
I can promise you that.
I actually do believe that. I don't think that you're a pederast.
I'm not a
I actually do not think that you're a pederast.
But
I think you're lechy and disgusting.
I have been to places I probably shouldn't have gone to, and I'm here to admit.
And I think that your idea of age of consent and my idea of age of consent are probably different, but I don't think that like you like prepubescence.
No, I definitely don't. I like them with a little what's a proper expression that I could use
Turf.
on this show? I like turf on the tarmac, and so just make sure that you got something going on there. If it's if it's completely without turf, then it's just not for me.
Go.
I definitely can't do
You've
that.
gotta go.
But I would definitely say to those of you who are wondering why my name is on this list, why I am Visitor 36, well, we had to use certain code terms. And of course, 27 countless times I just had to use a specific type of code. Kind of like with the Secret Service. We have like code words for how you identify who everybody is. But I just want you all to know that if you think that the Clintons are finished after this, I can assure you, it's never going to happen. We run the show. We have everyone in our hooks, and those hooks are deep.
I noticed that what's her name still alive.
Well, she hasn't been met with an unfortunate accident just yet.
I'm not sure where she is. I know she's incarcerated somewhere, but what's her name? Ghislaine Maxwell.
Well, I can just say one thing, and I will say this: if by some miracle they manage to put me in a situation where I have to name names, believe me, I've got a lot of names I can name. Ain't that right, Hillary? I'm just saying. Don't think I wouldn't. Don't think I wouldn't.
Or is it that she's connected to the Mossad?
Oh, well, I am not going to address that here and now.
Well.
But as I said, I have my own kill switch. And if I have to use it, you better believe I will. So just be prepared. It's going to be a bumpy ride here in 24. I can't believe I lived this long. I had that heart problem all the way back, like almost 25 years ago.
Yeah, but then after that, you changed your diet, and then you got too skinny, and you didn't look as cool.
But you
got too skinny in the face.
But I still had the ladies coming after me, and that was really what it was all about.
Know.
I couldn't live with the prospect of knowing that I had to live by Hillary's side for the rest of my natural-born life.
Well, I will say, of all the disgusting people and lechy people we've had, you are in the lesser of the categories.
Oh, so, Jen, I can't tell you.
You're less disgusting than Joe Biden to
Jen,
me. If that
really,
makes you feel
you're kind of turning me on here, Jen. You got to go easy on that with the I'm not decent. You got to give me a break here. You got to be serenading me from a distance. I got to be prepared. This is kind of it's so good to know that
it's a very low bar.
I rise above the level of
ground plus. Yeah, right above that.
Like I said, I know I'm in maybe a little bit of trouble, but I always find my way out of it. I always have. I always will. And just remember, I've got the codes, and you can take that.
The island is probably not subjected to the jurisdiction of anywhere where there's going to be statutory laws wherein whatever the age of the person
certain
is.
papers are just going to happen to be not going to be
But that's why there's an island, is because there's no legal jurisdiction over it.
Oh, I totally thought about that, and so
that's the point.
Listen. Plausible deniability. I did go to that island. I was there many times, but I was always there for a cookout. It was really great food, especially the pizza. It was really great. You had a wonderful time. And what? Well, what did I say? I didn't say anything. I just simply love the pizza. It was really great. I mean, if you haven't had island pizza,
because you're gonna make us look like we're those people. We're making fun of them.
I'm just as I said, do you like pineapple on your pizza? Because I can't go for that. That's just not for me. Being a Southern boy and always wanting the meats on the pizza. Although I should be a little, not so innuendo-like when it comes to that. But with that said, I appreciate you all. Happy New Year. It ain't so happy for me, but maybe it is for you. But eventually it will work out for the best. So, goodbye.
I was going to say, do you want some pizza? But I don't want to, that to me is all silliness.
Yeah, it is. And
that's silliness.
It's all fun and games.
Yes. No, we do not. That's not.
We don't play into the Pizzagate stuff.
No. But the man was definitely on the plane. Yeah, the man was definitely on the island.
As an attorney, you always have to go with the facts.
The
facts are
his name
is going to be redacted, and how they're going to try to spin it is going to be even more interesting.
Well, he's not the. Well, this is the other question: is Prince Andrew on that list?
Kevin Spacey?
That's not the same thing. If Prince Andrew was on the list, well, yeah, that will be interesting to see. I mean, now that the Queen is no longer with us, that might not be handled the same way it would have been handled if her son was on the list. Yeah, that's another reason. That's another way people can get offed.
You never know. Thursday night, regular time, 9 p.m.
We're going to be here with another stream person.
We are going to be here
YouTuber.
with Dylan Burns. We will be talking Israel-Palestine, among other things.
And I don't know him.
I don't know him either. They reached out to us.
He reached out to us.
Apparently, we're.
But I did go and check that it's not like somebody like a crazy Zionist setting us up. You know, I did go and at least do some amount of rudimentary research.
Well, that's appealing. At least we know we got that going for us. Smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those wonderful things. John Lucas, Sable Miner, you don't like my music. Ted Affy. Ted Affy, get over here on YouTube. Generational Change with a J on YouTube.
Yeah.
Subscribe there.
Yeah.
That's where the conversation's happening.
Facebook's where all the boomers are. You don't want to be over there.
You want to be over here where there's 20, 30, 40 people in the chat.
Come sit at the cool kids table.
Travers, Metalopoly, Chris Garrett.
Eventually, we should get people in a Rumble that way, too.
Oh, yeah. Well, that
Eventually, I mean, because that is so much, it's safer. It's a safe space.
Teresa, Michael Cooper, great to see all of you guys. And of course, a big shout out to Tony D and Sandra Looney for becoming new YouTube members. Remember, you could become a member on YouTube. You could become a member on Patreon. You could become a contributor on Cash App. There's lots of different ways to contribute to our small but mighty channel. But we are extremely grateful for each and every one of you. It means so very, very much.
And Teresa, Chip, and Danny packages went out today.
And you're here on YouTube.
And I love
you're here on YouTube. Where
I love it. I am only totally joking just because Facebook does tend to be the older demographic of the social media platforms.
They tend to.
That's all. I am
Henry,
just joking.
great.
We have
Thanks
all
for checking
ages
in
here. Some of my favorite people are boomers.
Yes. Well, again, there's a different type of boomer that comes on
Absolutely.
YouTube versus Facebook. There is definitely some truth.
We're just joking.
So smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those wonderful things we ask you to do. We'll see you Thursday.
Bye, all.